It was long past midnight. A young operator stared at a gauge he no longer trusted. The number should have held steady. Instead, it was sinking. He tapped the glass. It kept sinking. Beneath his feet, under layers of concrete, something was beginning to stir. He reached for a red button. He believed it would make everything safe. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Go back, before the alarms, before the ash. There was a dream made of concrete and light. A man named Viktor Bryukhanov was handed an empty field. His orders were simple: build the future. He built a power station on the river. Then he built a city beside it. They called that city Pripyat. It was young, clean, proud. Roses lined the avenues. Families pushed prams past bright new apartment blocks. There was an amusement park with a tall yellow wheel. The reactors fed the city, and the city adored them. Bryukhanov became a hero of his nation. His plant carried the name of a great leader. Everyone wanted to live in his town. To be chosen for Pripyat was to be lucky. The men who ran the reactors were the elite. They were told their machine was flawless. They were told it could never fail, and some of them believed it completely. Why wouldn't they? The state did not lie about such things. The future was humming quietly beneath their feet, and it was beautiful. Now go back further, to a room far from Pripyat, to men who did the math. Years before the city celebrated, scientists studied the design, and a few of them grew very quiet. The reactor was cheap, it was powerful, it was fast to build. That was why the state loved it, but cheap machines keep their secrets. Deep in the numbers there was a flaw. Under certain rare conditions, the reactor could turn on its masters, push it the wrong way, and it would not calm down. It would do the opposite. It would race. A physicist wrote his concerns on paper. The paper was read, then it was filed, then it was forgotten, then something happened that should have ended this story. At a sister plant, far to the north, a reactor stumbled. The same family, the same design. For a moment, it slipped toward the edge. Engineers wrestled it back. A report was written. It named the flaw. It described the danger, and then that report was stamped secret. It was locked away in a drawer. They buried this file for years. Subscribe, because there are more. The men who ran the other reactors never saw it. The operators in Pripyat were never told. They kept working under a lie. They ran their tests. They trusted their button. They believed the machine loved them back. Their warning existed. It sat in the dark, gathering dust. Every person who could have spoken chose silence, and the clock kept moving toward a particular night. It was a test, nothing more. A routine test on a quiet spring night. The men wanted to prove the reactor was safe. They lowered its power. They waited. The machine grew sluggish, unstable. They should have stopped. They pressed on. The reactor sat on a knife's edge, and no one felt it. Then the readings turned strange. The young operator watched his gauge sinking. He reached for the red button. The button was meant to shut everything down. He pressed it. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a sound from deep below. A groan in the metal, a shudder in the floor. The rods began to fall into the core, and the core answered with a surge of power, not less, more. A thump, then a roar. The building lurched. The reactor's massive lid, heavier than a passenger jet, leapt into the air. The sky above Pripyat turned a strange and lovely blue. Fire rained onto the rooftops, and the future stopped humming. The answer was sitting in a drawer nobody had dared to open. Here is what the operators were never told. The reactor hid a pair of faults. Together, they were lethal. Begin with the water. The reactor used water to cool itself and to slow itself. But when that water flashed to steam, the reaction sped up. More steam meant more power meant more steam, a rising staircase with no top step. Engineers call it a positive void coefficient. The machine, pushed hard, would feed on itself. The other fault was crueler. The safety rods were tipped with graphite. Graphite does not slow a reaction, it quickens it. So when the operator pressed his button to stop the reactor, For a single fatal instant, he sped it up instead. The very act of shutting it down lit the fuse. That was the secret in the sealed report. The button marked safety was, in that moment, a detonator. The men in the control room never had a chance. They did everything they were trained to do, and that is exactly what killed them. The investigation began quickly. At first, the state blamed the operators. Human error, reckless men, a simple story. It was easier than the truth, but a scientist would not let it rest. His name was Valery Legasov. He stood before the world and began to explain, not all of it, but enough. The reactor had been flawed by design. The danger had been known for years, and it had been hidden behind a stamp marked secret. The operators had been set up to fail. They pushed a button they trusted. No one had told them it could kill. The flaw in the machine was never the real disaster. The real disaster was the silence around it. Someone knew. Someone always knew. Legasov recorded his doubts onto tape. 2 years after the explosion, he was found dead. A world away, a jetliner carried a flaw in its cargo door, and the man who found it was already being ignored.